I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 121. And today on the show, we're joined by Janis Putelis, producer of the Meat Eater TV show, and we're discussing the implications of social media on the future of hunting. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today we are tackling an important topic, especially for this time of year. And I know what some of you might be thinking. You know, it's hunting season. You want a podcast packed with hunting advice right now. And I get that. But stick with me on this one, because I think in the long run, I think the topics we'll discuss today are just as important, if not more so, than how to get an arrow or a bullet into a big old buck. What happens when you do get that arrow or that bullet into a big buck? Well, for many of us, it probably means we're going to be posting a picture or a video or something about this animal or this experience on social media. You know, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or some other crazy new thing. I don't know about you, but I love getting to see all the big buck pictures and the updates from across the country this time of year. But at the same time, social media is this weird double-edged sword, which in many ways is now leading to a growing spike in anti-hunting media attention and just a lot of kind of crazy stuff. You know, take, for example, the whole media storm created recently surrounding the Bomar bear spearing video and the whole Under Armour deal, or any of the recent African hunting photos that have caused various frenzies here in the States. You know, whether we like it or not, what we post online and how we present ourselves to the outside world, it's becoming a major factor in the future of hunting in America, in North America, and really across the entire world. So with that said, today we're joined by Janis Putelis to discuss this kind of messy topic of social media, anti-hunters, the importance of non-hunters and how they perceive hunting, and a lot more along those lines. In addition to being the producer of Steven Rinella's Meat Eater TV show, Janis is just a very informed and thoughtful person when it comes to topics such as these. So I think the end result here is that we had just a really interesting and thought-provoking conversation that I think if you guys can take a little time today to dig into this one and do a little thinking, I think you'll find it really valuable. I hope you will. So with that said, before we dive into this whole discussion, we do need to thank our partners at Sitka Gear for their longtime support of this podcast. And today's Sitka story comes from another Sitka employee, Alex Tannenbaum. And Alex came to hunting late in life. And in this story, he recalls one of his very first bow hunts for whitetails from a tree stand, and a pretty profound lesson that he learned from this experience.
As it's getting light, you know, I see some movement and I'm like, oh man, like that's a deer. Like there are deer here. Like this is crazy. And you know, the trail underneath of me, I thought for sure was like a cattle trail. It was just so heavily used. Like they're walking straight on it. Like they're gonna come like right under my stand. And you know, it's a buck, and I'm like, okay, it's 2 bucks. oh no, it's $3. Like they're just hanging out together, and I have no idea what to do. I'm going like, you know, my heart's just racing 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm like, I don't even have an arrow nocked, you know. So I'm like, pull an arrow out, and you know, and it's a mechanical, and so like the blades like pop out, and I'm like, you know, so I'm like putting the blades back in, and get the thing knocked, and I'm all shaky, and I try to like stand up in the stand, and I'm like, just, you know, the whole stand is shaking underneath of me because my legs just like, you know, can't. You know, you just can't get calm, can't get normal, and these things they're just coming and coming and coming, and I'm like, oh man, like they're well inside of 20. Like I don't know, I've never shot from a tree stand before. I'm like, wait, like trying to think about like, okay, where's their heart? What's the angle I should shoot at? Like, you know, like is as they're coming straight at me, like, is that okay? Like, can I? Nah, it doesn't seem like a good idea. And you know, like a frontal from above, like, nah, like I'm feeling like physics says that's a bad idea. And so they're underneath of me, and like, I mean, I'm looking straight down into like the basket, you know, like on each of them. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing in the world. And I'm not even thinking about drawing my bow at this point. Like, I'm just shaking that these things are here, and they're totally gonna like, you know I'm here. And so then I'm like thinking all of like the things that I've like heard and seen, you know, on hunting TV, and like the very limited amount that I've, you know, seen. You know, like, oh, you shouldn't look at them. Like, they'll feel you looking at them. And so I'm like looking up like at the sky, like trying to like look at them with my peripheral vision. Like somehow, like I know that there's like no scientific basis for that, but you know, just all the superstitious stuff, you know, that just is flooding through my brain as I'm trying to figure out what to do with these deer. And you know, and the trail like never allows them to really like get broadside. Like they're like dead under me, like they're walking away, like dead away, you know, and like I said, coming full front on, and there's none of that felt right to me, and so, you know, I just kind of let them walk, and and they were just having such a like, they just seemed like they were having such a like relaxed morning. And about 35 yards out, they kind of, you know, made a turn. It might have been because I made some noise, it's hard to say. And so I drew.
And we are going to pause right there. And next week, return to Alex's story to hear how this encounter ended and what Alex learned from this whole experience. And it's a little bit surprising what ends up happening here. So that said, this was a Sitka story. And if you'd like to learn more about Sitka gear and their technical hunting apparel, you can visit sitkagear.com. And now let's get back to the show and get Janis Putelis on the phone. All right, with us now on the line is Janis Putelis. Welcome to the show, Janis.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, we already had an interesting conversation about the Latvian Janises and various names off air here a second ago. So Dan shared, for everyone who's just tuning in now, Dan already talked about the fact he might be mad at Janis, so keep that in mind, everyone. But hopefully that's not going to be an issue, Janis. We are excited to have you here. And, you know, I have been listening to you on the Meat Eater podcast for a couple of years now, I think, and have always been really interested in your perspective and what you had to share and your experiences and different things along those lines. So you're a guy I've wanted to talk to on this podcast for some time now. I guess, though, before we dive into some of the different sticky topics that we're going to talk about here, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing today in the hunting world, and maybe how you got there?
Yeah, you bet. Try to keep it succinct. I produce the Meat Eater television program, which is hosted by Steven Ranella. So I work for a production company called 0.0 Production. They're actually based out of New York, but we have a satellite office now in Bozeman, so that's where I get to live, which is a pretty sweet deal. So that's what eats up most of my, so-called working time. I also do a little thing called Hunt to Eat on the side with my brother. It's just like a lifestyle brand kind of a project. We basically make hunting T-shirts for those people that aren't happy with the hunting T-shirts they can find in the major retailers. That's at least how I like to sell it. And I guess how I got here, I moved to out west Colorado at the ripe age of 18, skipped after high school education, and just got jobs working in restaurants and whatnot, and quickly got involved in guiding elk hunts and guiding fly fishing for trout in Colorado. And that, if you kind of fast forwarded a dozen years, and I ended up in Alaska actually for a job of my wife's. And from there, just through some very random small world type stuff, met Steve Ranella, and ended up getting hired on as what we call a WPA, which is a Wilderness Production Assistant, which is a position that's kind of unique to Meat Eater. I mean, I'm sure other production companies have that position, but I think we're kind of the ones that coined the WPA. So anyways, you basically start out as just a gear mule. And that was almost exactly 4 years ago and maybe a month that I basically hauled up a 75-pound pack up a mountain a few times. And 4 years later, I've produced the television program. So does that kind of give you a good enough background?
Yeah.
How old are you?
38 years old.
38. Okay.
Yep. Married for, oh boy, approximately 13 years.
Wow.
And father of five awesome girls. One just turned 5, and the youngest is about to turn 3 here in December.
Wow.
Awesome.
Now, here's the question I have. You and me, we grabbed barbecue one day this summer in Bozeman, and you told me that you traveled. I'm going to get the number wrong. It was like an astronomically high number. It was like 150 days or something crazy. So my question is, A, what is that number? And then how do you pull that off with the wife and kids? Because me and Dan both need some advice on that front.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, like with the wives, that you have to, set the expectations before you get involved in something like that. And it worked out really well for me. We actually talked a lot about this last week. We were on a moose hunt, and if anybody that's been moose hunting knows, you kind of sit around a lot and wait for the moose to show up. You don't really go chase them around. So we had a lot of time to talk. And my dad was there, and Steve was there, and we talked a lot about these relationships. And we were trying to, I guess, prophesize, or wonder if we prophesized when we met our counterparts. Or our, not our counterparts, but our, other halves, if you could ever guess how good or bad it might be, because I got married at like 24 years of age. So there's like no way I could have possibly been like, oh yeah, it's going to be great in 15 years. There's just like no way that I knew that. I just wasn't smart enough, and didn't have that kind of foresight. And so I feel like I got really lucky. But anyways, I got really lucky in the fact that my wife spent a lot of time in the field and was away from me in the summers, and then I would leave in the fall. And so it just kind of was always a part of our life, the fact that we had large chunks of time away. And it's evolved over the years. But now that I'm gone roughly 100 days a year, shooting Meat Eater, and it might be a little bit more. I haven't actually done a count in a couple of years, so it might be a little bit more now because we travel a little bit for the podcast, and SHOT Show, stuff like that eats up some time too. But it's just always been a part of our lives. And the way I guess we look at it is that affords us the ability to have just a very interesting life at home when I am at home, and it affords us the ability for my wife to stay at home with the kids and raise our kids, which is huge in our book, that they get to spend that much time with their mother. And when I am home, they're like, dude, what just happened on the latest adventure, and I'm
Right.
at home telling them about moose hunts and, Wolverine sightings and grizzly bear sightings and, sleeping out in the, on the dirt for 9 straight days and, flying around in super cubs. And it just makes for an engaging conversation. So I don't know if that's better or worse than every day of the week, and, nothing against guys that are bankers, but like, I just got a feeling that the guy from the bank doesn't like talk, quite so, he's not quite as excited when he comes home to talk to his kids about banking as someone that comes home and tells them about big adventures,
I think you're right.
So, does that answer your question a little bit?
It does. It's funny. 2 people I know you run around with a lot, Steve, and then Randy Newberg gave me some of the best advice on this topic. One time I was talking to Steve, and he just told me, pick your battles, like, and more so than pick your battles, don't battle. Like, give your wife the win on everything because you want to win all the hunting conversations. So he just said, I don't complain about the sheets. I don't complain about when we're going to dinner. I don't complain about the birthday party. I don't complain about the fact that she doesn't want me staying out late for X thing or Y thing or whatever. He just said, if you want to be traveling and doing all these things, just let her have the other stuff. And I thought that was great advice. And then number 2, you've probably heard Randy say this. He talks about peace over justice. Peace is more important than justice when it comes to some things. So those 2 things I keep in mind a lot, and it's worked okay for me so far. So.
No, man, I try to, and it's very easy to preach that and, much harder to practice it.
True.
As with anything, but yeah, I definitely, have heard those same pieces of advice thrown around a couple of times, and they go a long way. You just really had to decide what's important, and go from there.
Have you guys seen the movie The Flight of the Navigator?
No.
I haven't.
You haven't? All right. Well, anyway, long story short, this guy gets in a spaceship and he goes around the planet, whatever. It's basically a time travel device. Comes back to Earth and he knocks on his door and it's his dad, but the dad doesn't recognize him. So for me, if I was going 150 days, I would knock on my door when I came back and there would be a new husband at the door.
So that's one battle you can't win.
Amen.
Well, everyone.
No, believe me, that has crossed my mind. It's like when you're gone long enough and you come home, I'm not so worried about another husband being there, but like you walk in the door and having your kids be like, dude, you don't even look the same, because when you look at
who are you?
They're always changing,
Right.
and you kind of wonder if that's ever, it's definitely on your mind. There's no escaping it.
I believe it. So, one other thing I'm kind of curious about. I feel like a lot of people are probably curious about, is what do you do as a producer for a show like that? Because I think people see Steve or someone running around in the mountains, and then there's some cameramen. But what does Janis Putelis do during one of these great big crazy trips?
Yeah, well, it starts a long time before the trip. The beginning is probably when, Steve and I are just on a phone or chatting it up somewhere, waiting in an airport somewhere. And we're talking about, like right now we're looking at spring 2017 hunts and activities and adventures and just talking about what we want to do and where the show wants to go and, what topics we want to cover in the show and just decide on what adventures, where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And then once we kind of get that a little, more finalized, I'll start, researching the trip itself and just finding out if it's doable, if it's really going to be right for the show, if we're going to have, guests on the show or, somebody might be kind of hosting us there on location, get a hold of them and just kind of get as much research, no differently than you would do. It's, get research in a place to go hunt, but just trying to get all the groundwork kind of figured out, what it's going to take to be there and whether we're camping or if it's going to be a night in a hotel here or there. And I'm lucky enough now that I have a team underneath me that once we do pick a location, I'll just, ask them to get flights for the crew, and the crew too, so I do most of the hiring now of the cinematographers that work for us and our wilderness production assistants. Because usually on a shoot, you know, I don't know about most, I shouldn't say, because I really don't know. On our shoot, if there's just Steve by himself on a shoot, it'll be Steve, a camera person, a main shooter camera person, and then we'll have a long lens, you know, kind of specialist that will also work on production stills and other specialty cameras for doing time lapses and stuff like that. And then sometimes even yet we'll have an assistant and then myself. So yeah, it's a big crew. We can have a footprint of 4 or 5 with just a solo show. And so when it bumps to a guest, we're almost always at 6. And sometimes we're limited because of, you know, we just want to take less airplanes into a location, or if we have to fly into a, you know, backcountry spot in Alaska. And so we'll drop a guy and just everybody will kind of, you know, split up that guy's responsibilities and just, you know, carry a little bit more on their shoulders, so to speak, both in weight, you know, and in just job responsibility. But yeah, so once everybody's hired and we figure out who's going where and what, you know, all the logistics, you know, get figured out. And I try to do as much pre-production research as I can and just trying to figure out, you know, not only just about the hunt. Hopefully we have like a good idea of what the hunt's going to be, just because someone gave us a good tip about a hunt, or, you know, just a cool location and go check out, or what that might be. But just getting Steve some interesting information about the location or the people, the culture, and, you know, anything that's relative to hunting, you know, in those 3 topics. I'll try to kind of pick that out and write something up for Steve. At the same time, I'll write up what we call a treatment for our cinematographers, that a lot of these guys aren't necessarily hunters and they haven't spent, you know, they've spent a lot of time in the field. We definitely hire people that are backcountry savvy, but they may not have been hunters. And so I write up a treatment that if you've never been on a moose hunt, this is kind of what to expect. You know, there'll be a scene where we're, you know, getting off planes and flying in here. And then there'll be another scene of, you know, calling moose, and another scene where, you know, this and this happens. And then, oh, the moose is 1,000 pounds. So it's going to take 5 hours to, you know, butcher and pack a moose probably. So be prepared for this, and just kind of write out scenes, not to really write out the show, but just to really give the cinematographers kind of an idea of what to expect. A lot of times I'll get photographs just off Google Images of areas that I can share with them and say, hey, this is what it looks like when we shoot this show. This is kind of what we would like the show to look like, whether it's, you know, I'll use words like, give me a lot of big landscapes and big wides, you know, to really show the massiveness of the, you know, country we're in. Or if it's a tighter place, you know, like say a swamp where you're just chasing rabbits around, you know, those shots aren't even available. So everything might just happen much more intimately. You know, you just need a lot more shots of, you know, the macro flora, fauna, just, you know, small stuff that's going on in a location. So again, that's all pre-production. And once we get there, on location, obviously it's the logistics of getting everybody where they need to be, doing, you know, getting food bought and whatever for a camping trip, whatever that might be. And then we go into the production itself, or the hunt. And at that point, I get a lot of questions asked to me, but most of the time I'm just kind of sitting back and maybe taking notes on what's happening. And that way, those notes I can use to basically write up notes that I can then give to my editor, who will then, again, not being a hunter, needs to know, like, all right, you guys shot all this stuff of this, you know, sitting around making this weird moaning sound, waiting on a moose. I don't really get it. You know, what was going on here? And so I have to write these notes that kind of say, all right, look at it this way. This is what we're doing here. This is why we did it. This is why it's interesting. So during the shoot, that's kind of my main focus, is to really be thinking about the notes. And if I feel like we need something out of Steve just to kind of drive the story along a little bit, or to, you know, I just need him to expand on an idea. A lot of times I'll just have a quick conversation with Steve and say, hey man, you know, this I think is interesting. We should talk a little bit more about this when it comes to you. And then, with Steve, a lot of times it's not like, hey, let's check in right now about what's going on with moose hunting. We'll just have like a kind of a grander vision or a grander idea. And I'll say, man, that was interesting about how, you know, the biologist talked about how the moose, you know, interact with the amount of pressure of hunters in this burn area, wherever it might be. about something that we read in that pre-research, stuff that I was doing. And then a day later, maybe Steve will look at the camera and give me something really interesting about, that topic. So I try to kind of urge him along a little bit, I guess, to, if I think it's interesting, usually it's going to be interesting to the viewers. So
does that, are you the guy that makes Steve interesting then? Are you
no. There's probably maybe 1% Yanni in every show of like a little drop of extra tidbit of information that might come out of his mouth, something that we've talked about through the course of making the show. But no, it's definitely Steve. He's pretty amazing when it comes to that. And a lot of people don't know about how much background he has in the writing world, and just what a talented writer he is, and how much that really kind of forms who he is as a television host.
Yeah.
It goes a long way.
Yeah. I think he's great as a host of the show, but I actually am a fan of Steve most for his writing. I love his books and the articles he's done and everything. But I got something I'm kind of curious about. That's related to what you've just shared, and it's also kind of related to this larger overarching topic I was hoping we'd touch on. And that's kind of, how hunting is perceived by the public, and how social media and the greater hunting industry media, all sort of forms those perceptions. And I'm kind of curious, with the Meteor TV show, at least from my perspective, I think it's one of the shows that does a better job of showcasing what hunting is about and who we are as a community in a positive light. And I'm just kind of curious how much of that, went in on the front end when you guys are creating these shows and episodes and thinking about the direction of the show, whether it be an individual episode or just the overarching theme of what you guys have created over the however many seasons there have been. How much do you think about that? Is that something you think about at all?
I definitely think about it, and that's part of, I wasn't in at ground zero with Meat Eater. I came in about maybe a year and a half into it, so they kind of had that. They had their vision, I think, fairly well ironed out, and we're on a path. I hope that I've added to that, and made the message stronger. I don't think we necessarily have like ever created something like reactionary to kind of what you're talking about, but we've definitely not. We just want to make our own hunting show. We didn't, like, Steve is always stressing that I actually watch less hunting TV because, and he'll tell you this about writing too. It's like he a lot of times tries not to read stuff that's similar to what he writes, because that can influence then like what you put out as a creative. And I think the same thing kind of goes with what we do as a hunting TV show. And so we try to really just kind of make it original and make it our own. And that in turn has become what you see. So it hasn't been like because we're trying to make a certain message or whatever. It's just like, this is what hunting is to us, and we're going to share it. And it just so happens that it's turned out to be, what you see and kind of what people call this, like, a better way to portray hunting.
What kind of feedback have you guys gotten on that? I feel like I've heard you guys talk about getting a lot of positive feedback from either beginning hunters or non-hunters, but I mean, is that right? Do you guys get a lot of people commenting about that or talking about that?
Yeah, it's constant. I mean, emails and, Facebook messages and, every social media avenue you can think of, we get every day positive feedback, very little negative. You always have haters, but really there's very little negative, and it's definitely good to hear, and some of the greatest feedback, that I've seen that is, and why I really am just so happy and, proud to be a part of it, is when we get, like a letter from a senator or, just someone like kind of high up in like a conservation organization that writes us like a personal letter to thank, really more Steve, but us for doing what we do, because they feel like it's making a difference and it's the right message. And when you get those people, that had taken that time to do that, you go, wow, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, not to discount when we get new hunters going, man, you guys changed my life and I'm so into hunting now and I'm cooking time because I love Asabuco now because of you guys. I mean, I get, just as high off of that too. But there's definitely something special when we get just that really heavy hitting feedback,
Oh yeah, for sure. What do you think about the rest of the hunting media outside of what you guys are doing with Meat Eater? I don't know, what are your thoughts on it? Do you pay attention to the rest of the media world? Do you think is it showing us off in the right light, do you think?
Oh man, that's a tough one. That's a loaded one there, Mark.
Try to put you to the fire.
I really don't pay attention, and really it just comes down to probably the biggest reason that I don't pay as much attention, and maybe I should, is because I have my time that I spend at the office, and a lot of times I feel like it's kind of hard to be Instagramming or Facebooking at the office because it just doesn't seem right in my head. And then when I go home, I try to really practice just shutting it all down, putting it all away, and it's kids' time, it's family time. And that's where I need to be. And so if missing out on the rest of hunt media is, if that's the what I had to give, that's just how it's going to be, So, I mean, we all hear about the stuff that's in the news, the Cecils and the bear spearing as of late. It's I don't know if that stuff it's the media when it grabs hold of it, obviously it's not great for us. And it does seem like sometimes when we're making a lot of headway with, good positive messages that you get, it's kind of a big blowback. But at the same time, I think that I'm hoping that with the positive messages out there, that those just have a stronger foundation to have longevity, to where now, the story I always tell everybody is I have an aunt who is a full-on Buddha chanting, vegan, almost vegan, pretty much vegetarian, just what I call over-the-top woo-woo. Now, I love her. She's an awesome person. I love hanging out with her, but definitely not somebody that you would, when you met her, you'd be like, this person's probably not into hunting. But because of the way that I've talked about hunting and portrayed hunting to her now this has been, 20 years now. She tells me the other day that she's at some art, she does art, and she's at some a show. What do they call those at the gallery? I guess it's just an art show, right? She's showing off some of her pieces, a bunch of other artists there.
A gala.
And she overheard some strangers talking smack about hunting. She felt the duty on her shoulders to walk over there, introduce herself, and say, you know what? Not all hunters are like what you're talking about. And on behalf of hunting, and kind of went on to defend hunting and this different version of hunting that she knows of because of talking to me for, 20 years or whatever.
That's awesome.
So I'm hoping that kind of stuff, just again, that strong, it'll just have longevity, where these little nitpicky things that pop up in the media because, someone just made a mistake, or someone, didn't think, about what they were doing, about their action, and it kind of blew up, that stuff's going to fade away. And even after that happens, my aunt is still going to probably, go out there and speak on behalf of hunting, although she'll never kill anything in her life. She actually asks the ants to leave her back porch, as opposed to killing them with some sort of insecticide or whatever. Okay. So that really paints the picture of who she is. She's not killing anything, but yet she felt compelled to speak on behalf of hunting.
I think that is a really, really great example of the disproportionate power of in-person interactions when it comes to this type of stuff. Mm-hmm. Your personal interaction with someone and your personal representation of hunting is going to be much more powerful than anything someone might see on TV. So I think that's an important thing for all of us to keep in mind, probably, that one time that we interact with such and such non-hunter or so-and-so woo-woo person, what we say, how we say it might be their one in-person interaction with somebody like us, a hunter, and that might form their entire perception of what this community is all about, So that's an interesting...
No, you're right. Yeah, all these little blips that everybody gets through their phone and whatever, it just doesn't stay in your head that long, you know?
Yeah. What do you think about the whole Under Armour issue? You kind of referred to the spearing deal. What's your take on all that? We haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, so I'm curious about your thoughts and Dan's too.
Yeah, you're probably itching to talk about it, I'm sure. You know, and I've gotten the chance now since it's been a while. I mean, heck, it's been a month at least. No, I mean, the video's been out for many months, but I guess the blow up was about a month ago or so. You know, I got no problem with people spearing animals at all. Actually, when I was a young hunting guide, we hunted wallows a lot, you know, and we kind of got this idea that we would one day, you know, basically lay down in a wallow, you know, with a spear. And when that bull came in there, you know, you try to spear a bull. So it's not like I've never thought about doing it. And it's like I give, what's his name that did it?
Some Bomar, Josh Bomar.
Josh Bomar.
Yeah, Josh. I give him mad props for what he did. I mean, because it's like, I know, and I did listen to a podcast where he was interviewed by the Gritty Bowman guys.
Yep.
And like, you know, that guy did an amazing amount of training and practice. He's like a collegiate javelin thrower. Like, it's like I would need 2 years of practice probably until I could think about going and using a spear on an animal. So like, yeah, it's amazing props for what he did. I feel that maybe a little bit the way that it was portrayed on the video, there was I think, and it, not my personal opinions, but within the, you know, kind of group I run with here in Bozeman and just, you know, people that are involved with us in work, you know, we talked a lot about it when it happened. And I think the thing that got most people, it was kind of the excessive celebration afterwards, at least like around here. That seemed like it was just like a little bit distasteful and maybe a little disrespectful. And again, I'm not saying that that's what he meant by it or that that's what he was doing, but that's how it came across on that video. And I think that is like the biggest thing that we just have to, when we are putting stuff out there in the media, that we have to watch out for. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's legal, if it's ethical, if you did everything right, you got to think about how you're putting it out there. And I had a friend of mine asked me, he's like, when we were having this same conversation, he said, well, you like spend every day of your life thinking about how to make non-hunters into hunters. And I'm like, no way, not at all. But I do spend time thinking about how to like portray hunting in a good light, that non-hunters still be pro hunting and not anti-hunting. And so I do feel like, you know, that's one of those instances where, you know, somewhere along the lines, after it left them and they made it, they maybe just didn't have that producer or that oversight or a dad or someone just someone to say, hey, you know, maybe you should just alter this a little bit. Because I feel like a lot of other people could have done the same thing, go out and spear a bear and told that story in a little bit different way. And it maybe would have been, you know, not blown up the way it did and would have been a little more acceptable. Yeah. That's my sense on it.
Yeah, no, I think that you echo a lot of the things that are kind of floating around in my head. What do you think about how Under Armour reacted to it on the flip side of the equation?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't know the numbers enough, and I didn't really delve into Under Armour numbers, but I heard a couple of things through the grapevine that like Under Armour's obviously a multi-billion-dollar company. I think that like hunting is like $20 million for them or something like that annually. So it's like this microcosm of their giant company. So the people that are like, oh my God, they're tapping in and just trying to, you know, suck money out of hunting and now they're distancing themselves from hunting because of this thing. It's like, well, kind of, but not really. You know, they've probably done as much good as they have, you know, if any bad at all for hunting. And so I don't really get that argument. I feel that that reaction was pretty normal, you know, with the way that it blew up on, you know, wherever you want to call it in the media. And I feel that probably where the mistake was made is that, like I said, the right filter wasn't in place early on. Because if I understand correctly, they actually posted the video long before anybody got mad about it. Is that right? Is that how you understand it?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so again, I just feel like somebody in Under Armour wasn't there to be like, oh man, you know what? This is cool, but
Yeah, for sure. I kind of feel the same way. They're a business, and hunting is a very, very tiny part of that business, and they're going to make a business decision. I don't think, we were on your podcast, Dan, talking about this earlier this month, just after it happened. And my whole take on the thing is probably almost exactly what you just said, Janis. Number one, when it comes to a business, I'm not expecting them to fight on behalf of hunters or, uphold our rights or something, because that's not who they are. Maybe if it was a purely hunting company and they were 100% dependent on us, you might expect that. But I will always expect a business to make business decisions. Even though I might not like that, and maybe I won't think it's right, it's still probably the realistic expectation we should have. So in this case, like you said, Janis, it's a microscopic, tiny piece of their business. Of course, they're going to err with the larger part of their customer base. Then to the point of the video itself, I think that's the bigger question, or the bigger takeaway I've gotten from all this, is just what a reminder this is of the negative power or negative influence that one mistake. And like you said, maybe it's not a 100% mistake. Maybe it's just a little tweak of how they presented things. But whether you like it or not, I guess it's how significant of an impact one piece of content like this can have if it's perceived negatively by a large population of people. And I mean, we saw coming out of like the Cecil stuff, that was illegal stuff that happened over heck, I can't even remember exactly what all was finally decided on, but stuff going on over there changed laws related to airlines importing parts and hides and different things from animals over Africa. That influenced tons and tons of people. In this case, because of one video that, whether they did a great job with it or not, this one video got picked up by the media, picked up by the general public. They perceived it pretty negatively, and now all of a sudden we're seeing spearing becoming illegal in different places. So my big takeaway is what happens, this is like what's the right way to say it? It's, I don't know, like a warning shot. Really serious stuff can come out of these types of quote-unquote mistakes. So we need to be careful about what we put out there. We need to make sure that we try to have that filter and think about these things. Like you said, take an extra second and say, how's this going to go over? Because the ramifications are really significant, as we're starting to see.
There are many methods of take that are completely legal in the lower 48, in Alaska, in Canada, that if you make a video of and really showed it exactly how it goes down, people are going to freak out about it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's legal. It's ethically right. I'm not going to mention what those things are, but like there are methods of hunting that are completely legal, but to most people are going to be like, if we hunted with bows and arrows the way that Art Young and Saxon Pope, did I get it right? It wasn't the opposite, was it? It was Art Young, I think.
Yeah, I think you got it right.
I mean, those dudes, if you read their stuff from back in the day, they rolled around packing like 200 arrows into a hunt camp. And They would fire at all kinds of ranges and fire many, many arrows at a single animal to bring it down. You go ahead and make a video of that going down right now and see how fast traditional archery or even archery is going to last.
Mm-hmm. So then what about this? And Dan, I want to get your take too, but really quick, I'm curious from either one of you. So when we start talking like this, when we start talking about, like you just said, Janis, there's certain things that if we made videos of it, it would have, huge blowback. When we start talking about this, you start getting some people saying, stop your pandering. Stop pandering to anti-hunters. Stop being a big wuss. And, we have the right to do this. It's legal. We can do it. I don't need to apologize about it, blah, blah, blah. What do you say to that?
No, they're completely right. You don't have to. No, nobody's like forcing them to do that. But if they haven't figured it out yet, laws are made and, rights are taken away by voting, and people will vote our hunting so-called rights right out from underneath us.
Yeah, we're definitely, and what scares me is the knee-jerk reaction type decisions that come out of this stuff. Like there's this huge outcry, and then before even people get to think about it, changes are made. Laws are changed, or stuff happens so fast because of some crazy outcry that now maybe the media or social media or something allows these things to spread so rapidly, and then bam, this thing's done. That's what really scares me.
Yep. And nobody's talking about spearing bears anymore. I mean, I don't know. I've been in the woods for 2 weeks, but just flipping through Instagram today, there wasn't anybody, talking about spearing bears. It's kind of like that conversation's gone.
Right. It's in and out. What's your take on all this, Dan? We haven't got to have your opinion on this whole deal on Wired Hunt yet.
It really sucks because I think there's a whole bunch of issues in this one instance that need to be talked about. And it's not, this isn't the podcast to actually talk about it because it's an entire podcast by itself. But for me, kind of a breakdown of it. Do I think that hunt could have been edited a little bit different before it was released? Yeah, probably. Do I think that hunters, like the people who are producing this, who are we making this for? Do we need to make sure that we're editing it and putting it out, for the person who may get offended by it? I mean, how long until we're not showing kill shots on animals anymore on our hunting videos? You know what I mean? Just to say, I don't want to offend these people, so they get pissed, sign a petition, and then my sponsors drop me. I understand that there's a lot to talk about in there. I'm kind of fired up when it comes to, Under Armour. They posted the video, shared it, were congratulating Bomar several months before the antis got a hold of it. They signed they put down a petition that, was upwards of 7, maybe under, I'm just going to say under $10,000 or 10,000 signatures before it was all said and done. And when all that went through, that just shows me that a company who was wanting money from us then got pressured by anti-hunters, dropped these guys. That tells me right there, I'm not gonna buy Under Armour again. I'm not gonna wear Under Armour clothing again, because they didn't stand behind who they were trying to get money from. Although, yes, it was a good business decision for them. I'm a hunter. I don't need to support them, right?
Right.
And then there's the whole issue about, like the Drurys, the Lukoskis, the Eva Shakis of the world, the Cameron Haynes of the world. Why are you still supporting this company when when they just did not back the hunter on this occasion? Now we're talking about business again, because we know that these guys are getting paychecks from Under Armour. These guys are going to be potentially, if they stood up to Under Armour and said, we don't like what happened here, there's giant contracts in place that we don't even know about, dollar amounts that we don't even know about, where they could be not only losing, but Under Armour could come back and say, all right, well, you're the reason that you're dropping this sponsorship. So now we can come back and take some more, than what we've actually given you. So that's stuff that we don't even know about that could potentially happen. So of course the Drurys put out a vague response. Other celebrities or entertainers put out no response at all. And for me, that, I don't know why, but that kind of rubs me the wrong way, because they're making their money off of us, right? They're getting their dollar amount, their money, to try to talk to us into purchasing, Under Armour gear. I'm not going to purchase it. So why are you repping it after all this happened? These are just obviously random thoughts coming into my head all at one time, and no organization. But, so it's just, there's so many things wrong. And then we have which to me is the most important thing, is this has caused even a bigger divide amongst hunters, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this is all kind of past. right now, right? We've forgotten about this. So how long until these anti-hunters, go to some hunter who does a really, and I'm just going to use this as an example, goes to the Meat Eater television show and says, you know what? I don't like you. I don't like this. And they're going to find a way to get, 10,000, 20,000, however many people to back these, because there's way more crazy assholes out there than there are sane assholes, in my opinion. So I don't know. I'm just firing off random thoughts. My brain's firing random things. But I think that it's way bigger, and there's so many topics within this one instance that you need to break down and talk about. So the long story short, I feel that it's caused even a rift between hunters, and when we need to kind of look past it and remember that we can't let the anti-hunters win no matter what happens. We have to unite and unite under one voice so that our privileges, our rights are not taken away from us.
You bring up a lot of interesting things, which you're right. We could dive into a whole bunch of those, but what you just said there, right? We've talked about this before, but I'm curious about your take, Janis. This whole topic of uniting as hunters versus, calling things out. Like, this maybe isn't right, or maybe we need to tweak this. I feel like when that conversation starts happening, like I know you and Randy had a big conversation about the long distance shooting thing, and how you said, well, okay, there's some questions about some of this stuff. When you start having those questions, there's a certain segment of the hunting community who will say, if you're raising those questions, if you're saying this stuff, you're dividing the hunting community and you're helping the anti-hunters or whatever. What do you think about that, Janis?
Yeah, I don't sense the divisiveness quite as much. And again, it might be just because I'm not looking at it in the media and seeing it there as much, because I feel like I really haven't run into too many people that feel too outside of this issue, than I do, or that we've been discussing here. But I mean, I don't know. It's like there's bad apples in every category and every group of people in life. I mean, if you want to go there, I mean, you can look at it like with the Muslim thing. It's like, in my opinion, all Muslims are not bad. Are there some bad apples right out there right now that are really making them look bad, especially in American eyes? Yes. It's really, really bad. Does that make all Muslims bad? Not in my book. So the same thing with the hunting thing. And I feel like with the hunting thing, if you keep, and this is just an isolated incident, and with the Bomar thing, I don't feel like he's a dude that's purposely shooting, like Steve says, shooting holes in the bottom of the boat to try to sink our collective boat. Mm-hmm. But if you have a person that is consistently doing that is just using rhetoric, that is not helping us move forward in a positive direction, and it might be because he's got the right, he's saying okay things, but it's just the rhetoric. It's just the wrong way to say it. It's going to shoot holes in our boat and bring our boat down. Well, I do feel like we have to, kick that person out of the boat and say, figure out a different way to talk about what you're talking about. I mean, I think the best thing about all of this is that it's just that we should just be cool with talking about it.
Yeah.
Because if anything, all it does is makes all of us more knowledgeable about all these topics. And then hopefully we can have that same conversation with some non-hunter. And again, build this stronger, positive foundation that, at least upkeeps what we have. Maybe it will never, grow bigger, but at least we can keep it rolling a little bit longer.
Yeah. I feel like that's always what I end up on this too. We start having this conversation and, it always comes down to that. At a minimum, let's just allow the conversation and try to stay civil and talk about these things. And we don't necessarily need to agree on it, but I think it's a net positive if we at least talk about this stuff. It should not, in my opinion, it shouldn't be taboo to talk about some of this stuff, to talk about differences in opinion, or to talk about why maybe X is not what I think is the best way to talk about this, or whatever it might be. Yep. I think it's okay to verbalize that, talk about it, but I think maybe the the key is how we go about doing that. You know, if we're condemning and attacking that kind of stuff publicly, that's probably the stuff that is not constructive. It just shuts people down and gets people defensive. So maybe that, I feel like that's like my big takeaway from this conversation. I feel like occasionally pops up throughout the years as we have these different episodes. We kind of jump onto this every once in a while. Something happens where these types of things get in my mind, and I think this is something that would probably help in the country in general, whether it's hunting or not. Just being able to have civil conversations about differences in opinion would probably be a good thing, for sure. But
and it shouldn't, to add to that, to your like the taboo of just talking about it, it shouldn't be taboo if you have a change of mind. If we all have a conversation and at the end of it, I go, you know what? I kind of leaning a little bit more towards, Dan's thoughts now. I just kind of rethought it and I like what he said, and that changed my mind. Don't get mad at me for that. I'm just learning and rethinking. It's it's okay. Nobody should get mad about that.
That's funny you mentioned that. I was just having this conversation. I was on an elk hunt last week, and we were sitting there talking about it, with all the stuff in politics. Not to get into our specific political situation now, but you always hear this thing of flip-flopping. Such and such said this 10 years ago, but this year they said something totally different. They're a flip-flopper. They're horrible. And I got, you get to thinking, you're evolving views, being open to learning and adjusting your perspective, how is that a bad thing, over time? Of course, there's some examples where it's obviously switching because of who you're talking to, and I know there's cases of that, but in some situations, I don't think it's such a bad idea for people to be open to evolution and viewing things differently and being open to other perspectives,
No, not at all, because I'm always hoping that if you're non-hunter, anti-hunter, that maybe you'll be open to hunting after having a conversation with me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think one thing that, back to the Under Armour thing though, is the power that the anti-hunters have, right? So, and I also think that a majority of the hunters kind of forget about that kind of thing. They forget, all they're focused on is what is right in front of their face. So with, a majority of the deer hunting season's opening here pretty soon, if not already opening, they're thinking about themselves and what they need to do to be successful in the woods, when there is actually a bigger picture out there all year round, right? So we have to realize that if the anti-hunters want to band together and, do all these things, they could probably do it. But so, when it comes to, preserving our rights, preserving our heritage, conservation efforts as well, I just feel that, we have people, the hunting community just kind of forgets about the important things when it's not right in front of them, when it needs to be in front of them all the time.
Yeah, nothing's really stung us lately. Bit us hard enough to really be thinking that way.
Right.
And I think to your point, it's something we always need to be vigilant of. And then also, at least from my perspective, I'm not really concerned about anti-hunters. There's that 5% or 10% or whatever it is that just downright is not going to ever be okay with what we do or anything along those lines. But it's that other, 85% or 90% or whatever it is of non-hunters that are kind of in the middle. They're on the fence. Yeah. I think those are the hearts we need to win, or at least, and right now, for the most part, they are generally, okay with hunting in certain contexts. I think we talk about the stats a lot, I can't even remember what the exact numbers, but a large majority is okay with hunting in general. But when you start talking about, hunting for food, yeah, everyone's up for that. But when you say hunting for trophies, trophy hunting, then it's down to 22% are supportive of that. So there's all these weird little nuances that the general public, how that influences their thoughts. But, I'm getting on a tangent. Long story short, I don't worry so much about anti-hunters. It's how is the rest of the general public perceiving what we're doing? And people hate thinking about that. I know what you're saying, Dan, when you talk about, how far do we have to go? Can we not show kill shots anymore? Can we not show blood anymore? Can we not, do we have to completely pander and pretend that this is something that it's not? I get that frustration, and I don't know how far stuff's going to go. And I don't like that either. But at the same time, I'm also just a realist. And okay, when X happens, Y is the result. So when something gets out there that the non-hunting public is not okay with, it is making a real negative change to what we can do, our rights or our privileges or whatever it might be. So whether I like it or not, I'm still going to try to make some kind of change to reduce the chances of that negative outcome. Whether I think it's right or not, it's just, hey, this is the reality of it, and we need to do something. So it's either we change the reaction, we change how people react, or we do something on our end to make sure the reaction doesn't happen. I don't know what the right answer to that is, but for me, it's how can I reduce the risk of this negative reaction as much as possible, while still being able to do what I love. And that's the trick, I think, for all of us today. I think this is kind of where I wanted to steer things next, is just how this isn't like just a media thing either. This is like an individual person thing, you know? I mean, it's not just the actions of some famous hunting celebrity that could, have a negative reaction. It could be Joe Schmo Hunter. A big difference, is 25 years ago, if I had a hunting picture or if I had a hunting video or hunting story or whatever, the only people that ever would see that would be my friends and family, like the people who get me, the people who have a context, the people that are in my own little tribe. But now with the internet and everything, I might post that on Facebook or post on YouTube or whatever, and, I made that for fellow hunters, or I, wanted to show this to my hunting buddies, but now through crazy ways of the internet, all of a sudden it ends up in an anti-hunter's hands or someone else who then, uses it for some horrible negative thing. And we just don't have that control like we used to. So I think the onus is on the individual now to have that filter like you were talking about, Janis, to at least think about this stuff, right?
Yeah, totally, man. I use that example of the the little, when was the last time you had like your little flip photo album? It's like everybody used to have one of those that had like 20 or 30 pictures in their truck. You'd meet somebody on a job, and then you'd like be like, "Oh, you're a hunter too? Oh, at lunch, let's share our photos." You'd share, trade them, and you flip through the little book. But now it doesn't work, and so it was only really shared. You had that filter already in place. It was only shared with other hunters. Now, yeah, you put it on wherever, and it just blasts out to the world.
Right. Okay. So social media, good or bad for hunting? What do you think, Janis?
I think it's just bad for the world. It's bad for humankind.
What do you say, Dan?
Would you be in business if there was no such thing as social media?
Probably not.
Nope, neither would I. And that's where it's like, I almost feel like the power is somewhere else right now. So it's like hunting is existing because there's somebody else out there who doesn't care enough about it to like let it not exist. Does that make sense? Does that make sense at all?
You're saying like hunting is okay right now because the people that wouldn't be okay with it just don't care enough to do something about it. Is that what you mean?
Right. Or they might not be organized enough to quite attack it yet, right? I just feel like this is like a battle cry, right? I don't know why, but it's like right now this whole Under Armour thing got forgot about in a couple weeks. No one's talking about it anymore. It's water under the bridge. When in my opinion, I feel that is an attack on us. They just organized and said, okay, we don't want you to support this group of people anymore. So they organized and they won a small battle, right? So what have we done? What have we done?
Yeah. Well,
I don't think we've done too much of anything.
No, I think it's not a new thing though. Right. I mean, this was one instance related to like a hunting, like a visual, like a personality or something. But I mean, probably every month or every week somewhere across the country, there's some kind of anti-hunting initiative, whether it be trying to ban the use of dogs for mountain lion hunting in California, or trying to ban the use of baiting for bears in Maine, or trying to...
Or that National Deer Alliance article, they were coming out with Staten Island not allowing I think it was Staten Island,
Yeah.
or was it Long Island?
It's Staten Island.
Not allowing hunting, so they captured the deer and sterilized them instead.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
Yeah. There's a lot of these things going on, and I think, this has been going on for a long time, right? And we haven't lost our privilege to hunt, but I think what we see is like there's this small minority, right? Anti-hunters are a very small minority, but they're loud and they're passionate about something. And then you've got the hunting community that's a small minority and we're passionate, but the difference is this. We as hunters, we're passionate about our own activity. Like we're passionate about what we do. So we put most of our time and energy and passion into doing that thing. Then you've got the anti-hunters. They're not passionate about doing something they love. They're just passionate about stopping us from doing our thing. So their whole passion, their time and energy goes into the action of stopping what we're doing. So I think that's why we see like they're taking actionable steps maybe more often than the hunting community does sometimes at defending that. But to your point, Dan, I mean, we do need to be ever vigilant. We do need to be, getting involved when we can. And as individuals, I'll keep preaching it, we also need to do our own individual part too to portray a positive representation of all this stuff. And then get involved with organizations that are supporting hunters and give our time and energy and money to do all those different things. Because I don't think this is going to stop, right? I mean, we had the Bomar thing recently. We had Cecil the lion last summer. We had, the Melissa Bachman with a dead lion, and we had such and such person with another African animal. And there's always, it seems like it's just becoming a trend. And I don't know what's next, but I don't know. I don't know where this all goes. But we need to probably do a better job of preemptively preparing for it, I would think. But how do you do that? That's the question. I don't know. You guys have any bright ideas? But actually, before we move on to those next thoughts, we need to take a quick break to thank CamoFire.com for sponsoring today's podcast episode. And CamoFire.com is a daily deal website for hunters that offers limited time, huge discounts on great hunting gear, including very often some great deals on Sitka gear, which my friends and I have taken advantage of in the past, which is pretty nice. But interestingly enough, in my previous job, before going full-time with Wired to Hunt, I actually got to know the founder of Camo Fire just as he was starting this business, as they were actually using some of the online marketing tools that my company had created. So that said, I recently reconnected with Camo Fire founder Kendall Card to hear just a bit about what it was like launching a company like this from scratch.
Man, it was like everything was against us to get Camo Fire off the ground. And even at one point we threw in the towel, and, my wife encouraged me to kind of rekindle the website, as it was almost done, and like, okay, fine, we're going to give it one more try. And it was, so, I mean, we launched it, and it was, it was like, man, I can't believe it took us that long just to get to this point. And it still wasn't perfect. I mean, that's one thing that I kind of learned about business, and is just like, you wait for something to be perfect, it's never going to happen ever. Right. So it was, it was kind of it was a whirlwind of struggle and conflict and overcoming a ton of things. And then finally just having enough grit to put it together and launch it. And so Camo Fire was a pretty humble beginning, right, in Mark's basement. And from there we've obviously grown. It's been almost 8 years. So.
Wow. What did that feel like, that moment after all that adversity, when you finally, turn it on and send it out into the world? What was that moment like for you?
Well, two things. It was thrilling and scary all at one time. It's like, I'm psyched we finally got this thing up. And then it's like, okay, people can start buying stuff now.
I can definitely relate to that kind of shock of your thing actually launching and trying to wrap your head around that. And yes, you can start buying stuff now. And if you'd like to check out some of the great deals that Camo Fire has going on, you can visit camofire.com and check back daily, as their deals are changing out frequently. And with that said, let's get back to the show.
I don't know. I'm too pissed.
I don't know, Janis, does any of this make sense to you?
No, man, it all makes sense. I think, like I've said before, the conversation is as important as anything.
Amen.
And just, I mean, Dan brings up a good point. It's like, what have we done? And it kind of took me a while to, think about that. But I do feel that, like, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, they've got their hunting is conservation message that they're trying to push,
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. It's good. Like, all those facts are great and whatever. Do I feel like it's maybe sometimes it's just like we're patting ourselves on the back because when they put it out on their Instagram, who sees that besides hunters?
Right. Very true.
Right.
It's like, great. Good job, Mark. Good job, Dan.
So it's almost like we need a message, it's like we need to form a voice. It's all right. Like what you said, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is doing all these great things, but they're not telling that to the people who don't like us.
Right. The hunting community needs a PR agency that talks to the rest of the world. That's what we really need. We need some PR help. And interesting, I don't know if you saw this, Janis, given your connections back to Colorado, but I know Colorado has actually been, I'm not sure if it's their Fish and Game agency or who's funding this, but they've done like an advertising campaign promoting the positive benefits of hunting and hunting dollars and conservation and stuff to help the whole recreational public. Have you seen anything about that?
Yeah, you mean like have you hugged a hunter lately thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool idea.
No, very, very, man. And like, I think that came out right when I was leaving Colorado. And you'd see just posters pinned up where there's like the mountain biker with his bike in one hand in the midstream, like hugging the fly fisherman, and it had the message right there. It's like, that's awesome,
Yeah.
That message needs to be spread throughout the nation for every state.
Yeah. There's your...
I feel like in rural areas, it happens a lot more. We have a good friend, Kevin Murphy, down there in Kentucky. We've done a couple of episodes with him now, and he's just the huntingest, fishingest fool you've ever met, man. The guy just gets after it, and at the same time, he's just so involved with his community and such a positive force in his community that anybody that's remotely, affected by what he does is probably maybe not pro hunting, but like on the plus side of hunting. They're not anti. They're like, even if they're not hunters, they're probably not going to vote against it or speak badly ill of it because of what this guy does, in his community and how much he's involved, and he's, taking kids out hunting and just being involved in just like boating access, putting in new boating access, and he's there. And so while he's there, he's talking about how, like, yeah, man, I'm doing this for everybody. I'm, personally, I'm going to use it to maybe shoot a couple ducks as I float down this river or catch a couple brim or whatever it might be. But, he has just by being in himself and what he does in his small little community in Kentucky, like, he has a huge positive impact. And I think it happens a lot in those kind of places where it's not happening. It's much harder to have that impact and that voice heard is like in Metro Chicago. Right. It's very hard. But I don't know how to beat that because it's like I'm not really like making, monthly trips there to give away venison to people and speak on behalf of hunting, I don't like it's in the city where I see like a lot of those problems because it's just like they have no contact with, what we're talking about. And it's just all out of context. And when it's out of context, it's just hard to make sense of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people in these urban centers are so disconnected from anything. I mean, firearms is a great example too. I mean, they have no context. Again, exactly what you said. They have no context for a positive use or reason for having firearms. So, of course, they have these, what I think are misconceptions in many cases, but they have these beliefs or perceptions. And the same thing with hunting. When you have no contact with it, when you have no context for it, it's pretty understandable why maybe these people, when they see something pop up on social media or whatever, they jump to this like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And that's a big thing like we're going to be continuing to deal with as more and more people move to these places, more and more people spend more time on their computers and less time outside. more and more people's only, idea of what a wild animal is what they see on the Discovery Channel or what they see in a Disney movie. I think there's very real challenges ahead of us down the road. And I think what you said, Janis, maybe is one of the best things we can do, which is just simply like every single one of us just needs to know that we could be that one interaction. We could be that one person. And if we all think about that more and make sure that anyone that interacts with us, hopefully anyone that interacts with us enough, will have a positive, vibe or feeling or perspective on what we do as hunters. If there can be, there's 12 million deer hunters out there or something. If we could all be like Kevin Murphy, that probably could make a pretty big impact. But I worry.
Yeah, man, you affect 10 people and all of a sudden it jumps to 100 million, and then you're talking about, a third of our population. That's mega.
Yeah. I guess first, final thoughts on this whole deal with the media, with non-hunting perspectives. I mean, I don't know. Is there any other action item that you think we should be thinking about, or any final thoughts on this whole deal that, we should keep in mind? Because I think this is something that we should all probably try to keep in the back of our minds throughout hunting season, especially during hunting season, when the opportunity to share what we're doing or talk about what we're doing or demonstrate, this is the time that stuff's getting out there. So what would you want people to be thinking about?
Yeah, it's funny, man, because we were going to talk a little bit about growing up hunting whitetails in the Midwest, and we can do that at another time. But I still remember when we used to kill deer in Wisconsin and then drive back to Kalamazoo, Michigan. We had to go right through Chicago. A lot of times we drive right through downtown, and we'd have 3, 4, 5 deer strapped to the hood. And then we had one of those little trailer hitch, not to the hood, I'm sorry, but to the roof of it was like a Chevy Blazer. And we had one of those hitch kind of rack deals that we ran for a while. And, we got all kinds of looks, but it's nobody ever was going to scratch our, car or pop our tires for it. But it's these days, I just don't know if you could do that. It's kind of like back then, even when we were, when I was a kid, I guess I might be a little bit older than you, but there was a time when there was just so many more hunters, not when everybody was a hunter, but everybody knew a hunter, and that's changed a lot to where if you, drove through Chicago now with that deer on your, the top of your truck, it's just you're going to be looked at as being disrespectful. But I mean, to your point about what we can do now, man, I think that the easiest way we'll go with, I don't know if it's the easiest, it actually takes some effort, but venison diplomacy, as Steve says it. It's I do it here all the time in the office because we have a lot of people that work here that are maybe not even associated with Meat Eater or just very remotely. But when we come back from a trip, we just came back with a moose, we've got hundreds of pounds of meat, none of these people were there to, none of them, some of them were there to help me butcher on Sunday, but for the most part, it's me and 4 other guys, we butchered for 6 hours. But I made sure that we had a lot of 1 pound packages of burger and 1 pound packages of roasts and, stuff you can cut up for steaks. And so that everybody here in the office is going to get their 3 or 4 packages. And everybody's so stoked on that. And they're there's just no possible way that they're at home eating that thing or walking home with those chunks of meat, having negative feelings about hunting at that point, And
sure.
Just to backtrack a little bit, we're always a friend of mine says this a lot. The hunting community has to answer to the lowest common denominator a lot of times. And I'm not saying that any of these people that got busted or that got blown up in the media are the lowest common denominator, but that, there's just those bad apples that that's who gets portrayed as who hunters are, when we all know who we are, but that's who gets chosen by everybody else to represent who we are. And so I don't know how to exactly counter that except to just, speak well, on behalf of all of us when you are out there talking to non-hunters, and don't be defensive, because being defensive doesn't get us anywhere. We should use the same advice that we use for, getting to do stuff and making peace with our spouses as we do with people that are non-hunters,
True.
and just you don't have to be exactly right You don't have to like win the argument. You just want them to walk away going, you know what? Hunting's probably okay, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
But yeah, I don't know. I think the venison diplomacy thing is huge, you know? And just, I think knowing our animals, knowing the biology of our animals. I was in a camp not long ago that we just happened to be staying at this church camp, and there was other folks staying there at the same time as we were, and we were there turkey hunting the adjacent property. We just happened to be staying there, and like these people were like, you know, they were like okay, they weren't like voicing their negative thoughts on hunting, but you can tell there was a little bit of tension when like we were there and we were like, yeah, we're here hunting. You know, it wasn't like they were sort of asking us like all these like, you know, interesting questions about what we're going to be doing and what we're doing. It's
Right.
like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Okay.
But they had kids there. So like the next day we come in at 11 a.m. with a dead turkey over our shoulder, and the kids come running over, and we're looking at the turkey, checking it out. And there's like nothing more interesting like than a dead wild turkey when you've never encountered something like that. It's just like the colors are unbelievable. There's like all these different interesting parts. And if you as a hunter can speak to all that stuff and be like, yeah, this is why this bird is so cool, and this is why I love it, and yes, I go and kill it, but this is, you know, and just explain yourself. All of a sudden, like, it was like the kids were there, and then 10 minutes later, like the parents were there, and then like the grandparents are there, and all of a sudden everybody's like, whoa, man, you think you might cook up some of that later, you know? And it's like, I feel like it made a difference, you know, like all the kids got to take home some feathers, and, you know, I just feel like knowing our animals as more than just, you know, the big buck, you know, with the big antlers, that goes along that I think are in our context. Cause again, it's like between you and I know that, you know, that your hunt is way more than just your trail cam pics of, you know, whatever you've named him, Mr. Houdini or whatever. I know that, but like someone else that looks at that from the outside without that context, they just see like, well, man, all he's into is these pictures. And I think all he's talking about are those antlers,
right.
You know?
Right.
So, yeah, I think just giving them the whole story, you know, it goes a long way.
For sure. I think that's, you know, my one big takeaway or big kind of, I don't know, final thought on all this is just to that point. It's look at every one of those interactions with someone as an opportunity to provide that positive context, to provide that positive example. And if you can do that so many times, that can make a big difference. And all those things you mentioned, sharing venison, knowing about what you're pursuing and being able to communicate that stuff all helps so much. So I'm definitely, you know, I'm always trying to keep this stuff in mind when it comes to in-person interactions or social media posts and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely think that hopefully if everyone listening and all of us can do that this season and, you know, in the future, that might make a little bit of difference, a little bit of a positive difference. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Janis.
don't be, if most of us are doing it right, but maybe maybe most of us just aren't actually putting our voice out there. You know, it's just like, don't let the bad apple be your voice, or don't let the lowest common denominator be your voice.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of sharing experiences, though, my last question for you, Janis, the last thing I'm curious about, how have the trips been going so far this season? How's the hunting season looking for the Meteor Crew?
Oh, they've been great, man. We had a super fun archery deer hunt in Nevada to kick the season off. Let me see, what do we do next? I was actually out for a Prince of Wales Island blacktail deer hunt because I had meniscus surgery, which I gotta say, man, if anybody out there is like thinking about doing it and you've got like some pain or some discomfort and they're kind of saying, yeah, go ahead and do it and then worry about the arthritis later, I highly recommend it, because I literally wasn't even off my leg for a day. And a week later, I went on a moose hunt for 10 days, packed moose, hiked around Tussocks, hiked up and down mountains. And it's like, I'm just so happy I got that done.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what the medical technology does these days. But yeah, we just did a moose hunt in the Alaska range. My dad was on the show. And
Nice.
he was lucky enough to call in a nice bull on the second day. It almost happened too fast. I mean, we've all been around enough to know that you take an easy one when it comes. But sometimes for production purposes, it's just like you just need a little more struggle before you get the result,
Right.
you know, and like reach the prize. At like day 2 in the morning, you're like, whoa, did we get what we needed to, you know, to make a show out of this? So, but no, that was great. And we had, you know, just great experiences. You know, Alaska, as always, it never lets you down, man. It's just such a cool, beautiful place. Yet man has been there a lot, but it's still just so much less than down here in the lower 48. And everybody's got to go check it out. Then let me see what's coming up. We're going to hunt some grouse in Wyoming next week, and we've got a mule deer hunt in Colorado, which I'm real excited about, and then elk in Montana. And that kind of about rounds us out. So
Nice.
it's go definitely between here and December.
Sounds like some fun trips, though. I got to tell you, I'm very jealous of how much time you guys get to spend in Alaska. Every time I see you guys or anyone up there, I'm just keep saying, I got to get there. And I finally decided, like, this past month, like, I'm just going to stop saying someday, and I'm just going to go. So next summer, I'm trying to put together, I'm going to try to get to do an Alaskan hunting trip. I don't know exactly how to pull it off. Nobody that I know has the time or the ability to go do it yet, so I'm working on figuring that out. But it just seems like something that you have to experience, and I'm ready to get out there. So, well, I guess while I have you, Janis, I'm going to be selfish here. Given your experience up there, what would you recommend for the first DIY Alaskan trip?
Man, it's a tough one. You know, the moose thing, I've been on a couple of moose hunts right now, and it's a great hunt. It's interesting. The animals are way cool, but it's definitely like it's a pretty sedentary. I mean, I know there's hunters that do chase their moose and kill them that way, but most people, you know, recommend sitting, calling. It's a pretty sedentary hunt. Even if you float a river, you know, you're going to end up probably shooting moose right on the bank or close to it. And so I don't know if that is on your bucket list, you can do it. But like, to me, I've been on a few caribou hunts. This is the first I got to kill a caribou last week, which is my first one, which is way cool. But to go and see, like, go to a place where there is the big numbers of caribou, where you actually get to see like just the massive migrations. It's a special thing because you don't really get that down here in the lower 48. And it's in, like, no matter how many times you see it on Discovery Channel, when you see it, you know, firsthand, and you get to watch a couple hundred or maybe 1,000 animals, you know, go by you in one day, it's just magical, you know. That was actually, Steve and I were talking about it, and I was saying, you know what, that would be one thing that you could go and see, and even if you didn't pull the trigger or fire an arrow, just to see that massive animals moving across the landscape. A lot of those animals that have never ever seen a human in their lives, you know, go in front of you. It's pretty special. And to me, I feel like the caribou just kind of really is a symbol of that, the North Country, you know, like you got moose down here. We got grizzly bears down here in the lower 48. Black bears, we have deer. Like, we don't have caribou, you know. That's like, it's definitely a North Country animal. And I think that, like, if you go to the right place, you are almost guaranteed to get into them, to probably fill your tag. There's usually lots of opportunities, and I think just, you know, getting a lot of references and making sure you got the right outfitter that's going to work hard to get you, or the right transporter. If you're going to go DIY, they're going to work hard to get you into the right place. If they don't get you in the right place on the first drop, you know, they'll maybe move you mid hunt to get you out ahead of the movement of the caribou. I mean, a lot of the pilots we talk to, they're just like, they keep telling guys, it's like, you know what? Just tell yourself, don't shoot on the first day. Watch the animals. Look at figure out what caribou look like. Because to all of us that, you know, especially ones that grew up in the Midwest, just like looking at whitetails all the time, it doesn't matter if you look at a yearling caribou. You're like, oh my God, look at all those antlers on top of its head.
I'm shooting.
And let alone you see one that's 4 or 5 years old. And they're just saying how often it happens where guys kill like the second day they're there because they can't shoot the day they land. So the next day, they shoot like the first kind of big one they see, and then also they got to get flown out because their meat's going out, and you're back on the tarmac, and you're like, whoa, hold on, that was my whole Alaska trip. Like I just went up there and it's over in like 72 hours. And so with a caribou hunt, you almost just had to force yourself just to go up there and take it slow, look and just watch them, enjoy it, and try to, not pull the trigger maybe until the third or even fourth day if you can manage. But anyways, yeah, that would be my, I think, first pick. If I had to just go back in time and say, all right, I'm just going to go do one Alaskan animal, I'd probably do caribou, and more just for the overall total experience than just because it's a cool, animal itself. But, to go get a caribou, you're going to get flown into some unbelievable country, and they do have hunts that you can do where you don't fly, where you could go ATV or even hike in. I know if you draw some of the permits on the Kenai Peninsula, those places you can just hike in. I mean, you got to draw that permit, but I don't know. I think I would just wait an extra year and save the money to get flown in to just, get away from, what pressure there might be off the road system in Alaska.
Man, that's good advice. I'm getting excited just talking about it. Caribou is definitely one of those species that is very high on my list of just a dream animal to get to know and to see out there. And it sounds like you said, like it's a reasonable, like you can go into that type of hunt doing it yourself with a reasonable expectation of being able to pull it off. And like I feel like with a moose hunt, when you're deep in there and with you or a friend or, that seems pretty intimidating when you get that huge of an animal that deep in the backcountry and figuring all that out. But a caribou seems like if you get in the right place, it seems like it's a relatively opportunity-rich type experience, and it's not quite as daunting as dealing with that ginormous moose carcass on the ground. You can kind of approach it a little bit easier. So, man, maybe 1 year from now we'll be talking about my caribou hunt. I hope so, and hopefully a lot of fly fishing too. So I'm excited about it. So, Janis, we gotta let you go. We've been talking your ear off here, but before we do, where should people go online to see what you've got going on with Meat Eater and your Hunt to Eat shirts? Where can we get those?
Meat Eater is the Meat Eater. If you don't have a Sportsman channel, we air at 8 on Thursdays, and right now we're in a fresh season, and so this Thursday we've got a Montana Bear episode coming up, which will be the 22nd, which will probably be, this podcast will probably air later than that, I guess. But anyways, Thursday nights at 8, maybe it's 8:30 Eastern. But if you don't have a Sportsman channel, you can go to meateater.vhx.tv, and immediately as the episode airs, you can buy all episodes for $2.99. And some people look at it as like a lot of money, but I figure for 22 minutes of good TV that $3 is well worth it. You have it forever. So that's a way to get around, if you don't want to, have pay for the whole cable package. And then Hunt to Eat, if you want to check out our T-shirts that my brother and I got going, it's hunt2eat.com, and that's T-O, not the numeral 2, so HUNTTOEAT.com. And I think we've got roughly 20 states or so represented, and we have some state-specific shirts that, if you want to, rep your home boundaries, you can. And then we've got another half dozen shirts that are non-state specific that cover a variety of animals and just some different designs, some stuff that like I said, you can't find it at the big retailers. So that's everything.
Awesome. Well, I'm loving my Montana Hunt to Eat shirt. It's been on a good number of trips through the mountains already, so I definitely can endorse what you guys are doing. It's good stuff. And you've got kind of like a Kickstarter type deal going too, right? for getting people new designs?
We do. It's actually going to run, again, I don't know when you're planning on airing this, but through the end of September, we're running basically like our own version of Kickstarter. We're calling it Hunt Starter. And we get just a lot of requests for people wanting, an Oklahoma shirt and a Tennessee shirt. And it's just hard. It just takes a lot of capital, to basically come out, to make another 30 designs so we cover every state in the nation. So we decided to do this Hunt Starter campaign where basically we sell most of our shirts for $25, but for the Hunt Starter campaign, you can go online and to our website and basically pre-order your state shirt for $15. And if we reach 100 pre-orders for, let's just say, Oklahoma, then at the end of the month, we're going to basically make an Oklahoma shirt and everybody gets a shirt for $15 versus the normal 25.
Nice.
If the anybody that orders, say, a state that doesn't make it to 100 orders by that time, we're basically just going to send them a new, we're working on like a new Hunt to Eat logo t-shirt. It's going to be way cool. And you're kind of going to get that as a consolation prize. So either way, you end up getting a Hunt to Eat t-shirt for $15 instead of 25. And hopefully we got a couple of states that are getting there. We're hoping that, with a little extra push here at the end of the month, we'll get a couple of states that actually make it to 100, and we'll do a few new state designs. So yeah, that's the Hunt to Eat Hunt Starter campaign.
Sweet. Well, we'll have this episode out before the end of September, so people have time to get on that. Very cool. Awesome, Janis. Well, man, I appreciate taking the time to do this and chat. Definitely through some of these, sometimes not so much fun topics to talk about, especially during hunting season. I'd rather talk about animals and adventures and everything, but one of those things that's probably good to have on the mind and chat through. So thanks for sharing your thoughts and perspectives on all this.
Yeah, man, no problem. I hope I didn't ruffle too many feathers. And if I did,
No.
then you guys just need to suck it up and, think about it a little bit. But yeah, I do appreciate you having me on, and it's I'm always honored when I get to be a guest on a podcast. I get to talk a little bit more than I normally do on our podcast. But I'll leave you with one little thing, because I know you've been talking about possibly making a move out west.
Mm-hmm.
Last night I got woken up in the middle of the night. I couldn't really tell what it was that was keeping me awake, but finally I just got out of bed and I was like, all right, I must have to go pee or something, So I got out of bed and walked towards the window that was cracked open, and all of a sudden I hear, I'm like, you got to be kidding me, So there's a bull outside, just raising ruckus. I go out onto my deck to go take a leak under the moonlight, and sure enough, there's two bulls and about 20 cows, I don't know, probably 300 yards, 400 yards off my deck, just, going balls to the wall. And I was like, yep, this is what it's all about right here.
I gotta say, I hate you just a little bit right now, Janis.
I'm jealous. That.
Oh.
Well, you're welcome to come and stay anytime.
Careful what you offer, because I might be out there before you know it. Well, thank you, Janis, and good luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, man. We'll talk soon, Mark.
And there you go. Another episode in the books, and I hope you enjoyed this one and that it gave you a little food for thought as we enter the 2016 hunting season. That said, before we wrap this one up, we need to thank our partners who help make this podcast possible. Big thank you to Sitka Gear, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Yeti Coolers, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Maven Optics, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. Thank you so much for supporting those companies who support us. It really does make all the difference in the world. And I actually just got an email from one of these companies saying that they got emails from some of you guys saying how much you appreciate that, how much you appreciate them helping make the Wired Hunt podcast possible. And man, that is the coolest thing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, with all that said, speaking of thanks, thank you all for tuning in today. Best of luck in the woods. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.